so feel free to just ramble on.
Oh, good. All right, welcome everybody back to Off Day with Ballpark Nation. There's so much sports to get to, Andy, that we're going to pretty much rapid fire this whole thing. But first things first, they did a special re-release of Revenge of the Sith, and I just got to go on record again as saying, look, there are a lot of people that have issues with the sequel trilogy in Star Wars, and I get all of those issues. But to me, the prequel trilogy is the greatest crime committed to Star Wars of any of them, in part because it's created by George Lucas, who seems to have not paid attention to the story he created that he was making a prequel to. Some of the stupid dialogue, some of the stupid character choices, like hiding on the home planet of the villain's father. I mean, of the father who's the villain and wearing the same outfit that he wore undercover, all that stuff. But Revenge of the Sith is the biggest crime committed because when you think about it, when you were a kid and you heard words like he's more machine now, or he hunted and killed the Jedi, I'm assuming you, like me, thought of years of combat that slowly turned this guy into a robot. Not that he killed more children than he did actual Jedi and became Darth Vader with one swing of a lightsaber.
I liked Revenge of the Sith. I think I should just say that out front. Of the three movies,
I liked it too, but I'm tired of the narrative that somehow the prequel trilogy is superior to all the trilogies, is what's coming out of these young people today.
This is the same, to bring this back to the Astros for just a second. This is the same mentality that tells you that the black hats and the brown and red uniforms were good because it's what they grew up with as their thing. So it's going to be the best, regardless of any empirical evidence you can put out in front of them that says, no, these uniforms are absolute shit. And 2/3 of the first prequel, or the prequel to Star Wars, was kind of shitty. It has its moments, but it has a lot of bad things in there too that has kind of ruined the rest of the universe for a lot of Star Wars fans of particular age. I'm sure somewhere in about 10 years, we're going to hear about how the last three movies were the best trilogy somehow, because that's what somebody who's 5 years old right now is growing up with as their thing. In better Star Wars news, evidently, somewhere in this country, they are re-releasing or having a run of the original 1977 or 77 print of Star Wars, completely untouched by George Lucas. So, hand shot first. There is no Jabba the Hutt. You've got practical effects on the Death Star blowing up. If you want that, that's what I'm here for. And Star Wars to me is about so much about nostalgia. I agree with your take. By the way, I think that anybody who is telling you that first trilogy is somehow good, I just objectively I can't get there. I don't know where they're coming from, but I think it's nostalgia. But overall, my nostalgia lives in the 70s and early 80s, from 77 to 83, when Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi were absolute king. And just because my nostalgia kicks in and said those are the best three, also doesn't mean I'm wrong, because they are the best three.
Well, and there's a reason why they keep coming back to those three. But you know, I've already gotten into it with people who are like, I guess, don't understand how to watch television anymore, because they don't understand why they didn't like the first 3 seasons of Andor, because 3 episodes of Andor, because it hasn't been figured out yet. And I'm like, it's an 18 episode season. Oftentimes things pay off at the end. Give it to the end.
I feel like you get two crowds that when you start group watching a TV show, something like Andor, something like one of the WandaVision, you get some people who get really bugged that there's no character development and they're rushing through things. And you get other people who get really bugged that it's all character development and they don't get to anything. That's kind of the argument about Daredevil Born Again. The whole thing was character development the first 9 episodes. Very little action. We've talked about that. You didn't see Daredevil, I think, for more than an hour total out of 9 hours of screen time.
Yeah.
And I'm probably being really generous with that hour because it was all character development. But there's this same subset of fans that if somehow it was nothing but action, or even just started tilting more that way, well, they didn't spend enough time giving me the motivation for Matt Murdock to do this. And I think Andor falls into the same thing. They don't give, if you are expecting one thing and you don't get that thing, it's obviously missing your expectations, regardless of whether or not those expectations are built in any kind of reality. And that kind of goes to film, to watch being a fan of a sports team, to somehow watching a bunch of baseball games and sporting events, even though all of your teams combined to go 1-7 for the entire weekend. And it was just gut punch after nut punch all weekend long. I mean, no,
Oh, the
some of us
Rockets. That was your 7th. Okay.
yeah, some of us didn't experience that this weekend. Some of us had the opposite side of that.
Well, I do want to get to some of that. And let's first things first. Since we did our last episode, the Astros have gone 4-6. And I think that might be the healthiest way for us to approach the show, because these things don't exist in sample sizes. They ran into 2 good pitchers, although ironically they beat up the better of the 3 on Sunday. I think that we can all still maintain positivity about Walker and Jordan, obviously. Fromber has actually looked good in 2 back-to-back starts now. The concern, though, Yonnier Diaz, but despite the fact that he homered yesterday, has the worst batting average going into yesterday's game of any qualified starter on the road. I think it was like 0.078. I feel like the dude is completely lost and might need some kind of a reset.
I don't know that the Astros have the flexibility to give him a reset, frankly. I don't know that Cesar Salazar is the answer even for a short-term period of time, although he did perform well last year when he was kind of pressed into duty. I think the way you reset him is start putting him in the rotation at DH, releasing his duties for catcher for just a little bit and let Caratini get more starts there. Because I think he's pressing. He's not playing exceptionally well defensively. And I'm basing that mostly on the fact that yesterday I think was the first time he's thrown somebody out all season.
Yeah.
And base runners combined. And believe me, we on this show do understand that most of base running is predicated on the pitcher and not the catcher. But when the pitchers are actually trying to hold guys and you're just not delivering the ball in a timely fashion, which has been Diaz's problem most of the season, it's an issue to the point that I think, I don't have the stats in front of me, but Astros opponents have only been unsuccessful, but prior to yesterday, twice all season in stealing second base.
Yeah. So basically everything becomes a double if they want it.
But I think that's, you're not hitting and you're not playing defense. What are you doing right now? And it's the argument of maybe like we did for Christian Walker, even a couple of games or one game, have him sit, have Caratini play, just have the day off. And, maybe we did a natural rain delay. I don't know, something. But there's something that just hasn't clicked for him yet. I'm really hoping yesterday he did have a double in addition to his home run. And it was an opposite field home run, so that was good to see. Is the start of something. But I also hope that Christian Walker's good game last Thursday or Wednesday was the start of something, and he proceeded to travel to Kansas City and do virtually nothing. It's just you talk about 3 guys right now who aren't contributing where you need them to be contributing, and that's Alvarez, Walker, and Diaz. And those 3 are the main reason we have the record we have, because the pitching has been almost lights out every night, certainly outstanding and above, I think, a lot of Major League Baseball's expectations. So that's, one
guys,
game under.
And guys are getting on, even guys you don't expect to get on base are getting on base like Jake Myers. I'm sure his average has dropped, but at one point was rocking around a 300. Yeah, only like a 700 OPS, but a 300 batting average. When you're the 9-hole hitter, that's exactly what you want out of your 9-hole hitter, is somebody just gets on base for you. Yeah,
and Altuve is going to be Altuve. Not ever worried about him, and I think his worst snap so far has been like 1 or 2 games this year. Pena has been a giant surprise for me, at least, because he's finally stopped chasing everything outside. So that's been pleasant. You've seen the results from that. I'm hopeful that the power is going to come back for him at some point, because it doesn't seem quite there. But I will absolutely take a guy who's hitting 270-ish, and I think that's where Pena gets to this year, and playing superior defense at the shortstop position. That's a plus player. Now I do want to bag on Todd Callis for a minute, because I was kind of watching, I think, the Saturday game, and Callis went on to say something along the lines of a split screen with Witt and Pena, and talking about they're 2 of the superior shortstops, premier shortstops in the American League. And then he did add that Witt's a little bit better offensively. Witt is 5 players better offensively than Jeremy Pena.
Yes. I believe he's on a 19 or 20 game hitting streak now. Witt is.
Witt's incredible. Witt is what the Astros wanted Carlos Correa to be for them. And Witt is that good. And fortunately for Kansas City, he signed that extension because he's going to be there for a while. But Pena's a really solid player, and I've been really impressed with how much progress he's made this year. Pena is not in Bobby Witt's league.
No. Yeah,
I think Todd Callis, it's okay for that to be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, exactly. The comparison should be how is Pena playing compared to Carlos Correa, and that was definitely a smart decision not to re-sign Correa. As sad as it makes you because you want all those guys to stay together, that's continuing to be one of the biggest pieces of proof to say holding on to stars as they begin to enter their decline is not, in fact, a smart strategy.
Hey, but I think overall the Astros had a good week. I know Kansas City was a little bit disappointing considering you were shut out twice and you had opportunities to win. Maybe not Friday night game because Seth Lugo was dealing and we didn't have any answers for him. But I think the opportunities were there Saturday and just didn't put them across. They did on Sunday. So you sweep the Blue Jays. You went 4-2 for the week. That's not a bad week.
No, if we keep piling 4 and 2 weeks up, you're winning the division.
And you're coming off a Padres series that you won that you probably weren't expected to win as well. So the Astros have a lot of positive momentum. But as we say, momentum is only as good as the next night's pitcher, and we face a pretty good Tigers team coming in for 3 in Houston.
We do.
A Tigers team that handled the Astros pretty handily in the playoffs last year, although I still will argue with most Tigers fans that the Astros beat themselves a lot more than the Tigers beat them.
Yeah. Well, again, just looking at some of the underlying numbers, the Astros have an expected win-loss record of 15-12, which would put them first in the division. They're plus 11 in run differential, and they've won 6 of 10. So, again, you keep piling 6 of 10s on there. Also, too, in a shout-out to the Astros locker, who pointed out that once this series with the Detroit Tigers is over, the Astros will have played the toughest schedule to begin the Major League Baseball season. And we saw this all last year. Remember last year it was like we're floundering and the schedule's tough, but there was a point in the schedule when we thought they should start making up ground. And that point probably begins this weekend with Chicago. Like that should begin with the White Sox of the moment where you start to see them start to actually build some ground. And I think you're going to see them in first place by the end of May.
Well, especially if the Rangers keep doing things like the ninth inning of that Giants game last night. I think that was I'm not sure if it was the first time ever because we've had a lot of ever in baseball, but losing a game on an inside the park home run, kinda, because it was, I think there were 3 errors in the play to the Giants. That's pretty good if you're not a Rangers fan. It's pretty fun to watch.
1 for 2. Taps this one to third. And he sails it down the right field line. Roberts is on the move. And he is going to stop. No, now he's going to go to third. Here's the throw. It gets by him. Here comes Ramos. This game is over.
No, yeah, man, that to me could not happen to a nicer franchise. I just giggled the whole way through it. I actually giggled and I projected it to the big screen, so Jessica could giggle. It was couldn't happen to a nicer franchise.
What was that at Arlington or was that in San Francisco?
San Francisco, so it was a walk-off.
Even better.
Even better.
I would have liked it to be in front of their fans though, because there's nothing better than scanning the park at McBade Park and seeing the disappointment of Arlington fans.
Well, most of them are still reading Cowboys draft analysis, so they might not even have been there.
Yeah. I think the one interesting thing you mentioned strength of schedule is that unlike last season or the season last year, which was a hard early schedule for Houston, I think the number 1 team there's a 3-way tie for the hardest schedule, and the Rangers and Mariners were right in that mix. So there's not the immediate opportunity to start playing catch up with the Astros had last year because both the Rangers and Mariners had really easy schedules early. If I was reading what you put out on Twitter
No,
correctly.
you're correct. I meant more just padding the record, not necessarily chasing down the other teams, though. I do believe the Rangers are still a flawed baseball team, and Seattle cannot get out of its own way with injuries. Not that we've experienced that plenty ourselves.
Well, fortunately, so far it hasn't been major for Houston. One thing that did happen, I guess, before the Royal Series or during the Royal Series is that, and stop me if you've heard this before, Forrest Whitley went back on the IL. At just some point, God has to stop playing jokes on this kid.
I don't know what he did. And we have been, you and I have been excited about Whitley since we first found out that he was untradeable. And he was a bit of a head case when he was in the minors, which really slowed his ascent. And then the injury started. But, as is a telling by the title you put on your name, it's apparently a misdiagnosed bone bruise.
Which feels like the second time that I'm aware of that's happened in the last 12 months, which is probably 2 times too many for what is supposed to be better medical care than you're going to get at an urgent care on Highway 290.
Yeah, it's very bizarre how, and I don't, like, you and I obviously are not entrenched in other fan bases. We don't know if this continues to happen, but it does seem like all of a sudden our medical staff has gotten pretty bad at their job.
Well, I mean, we lost Kyle Tucker with a bone bruise for half the season, 2/3 of the season last year.
Yeah.
And at some point, you have to kind of look internally and go, this can't keep happening. I know Forrest Whitley is not a guy that's going to be big on the radars and stuff, but let's say this was Yordan Alvarez and we misdiagnosed it and he misses 2/3 of the season. At what point do you start holding these guys accountable for not calling things the correct way? I mean, we yell at umpires for not doing their jobs. We certainly yell at front offices for not doing the job we perceive they're going to do. At what point does the Astros medical staff start getting held accountable for some of these things that, and I think you can look at Lance McCullers Jr. and Luis Garcia too, because Tommy John rehabs are hard, but we seem to have guys that need the full 24 months to recover, where other teams are getting guys back at 10 to 12 months. And again, we're very entrenched with the Astros, so maybe that happens more on other teams than I know about. But it sure feels like we've had our fair share of injuries that have lingered well past their expiration dates in the last few years.
It also seems extra frustrating to me because the Astros are playing in a city that is pretty much on the cutting edge of medical science. You can't find somebody that can tell you what a bone bruise is versus another thing.
I bet they make a fancy scanner, maybe one that goes ping.
Maybe. What else? Let's see. The other big baseball story. There's 2 big baseball stories that at the major league level I wanted to talk about. One, reading this article in The Athletic, and it was referring in part to in 2002 when the famous movie Billy Bean, and he talks about that there's rich teams, poor teams, 30 miles of crap, and then us, and the distance in payroll in that scenario between the Yankees and the A's was $80 million. This week, the Dodgers and Marlins are going to play, and the difference in payroll is $406 million. $476 million versus like 80 or something like that. I'm tired of listening to rich teams fans have their opinion on this because their opinion is it's a nothing burger, move on. This is a problem. And it's a problem that a city like Miami also doesn't seem to draw well because I would think that they would be able to, with the Latin American culture, its love of baseball, but it just doesn't seem to be working for a team that's won like 2 World Series in its very short history.
Yeah, Miami is an interesting case, and I think I've got a couple of friends who live there that actually follow the Marlins. They're part of the Marlins crew, and there have been. It's more than just budget. There's been so many marketing missteps. There's been so many failures to outreach to the communities that would go to baseball games. And the Marlins almost immediately priced themselves out of the entertainment market in Miami, which is not easy to do.
No, I've seen the video with Will Smith.
But I think the other big piece is that they won and then immediately tore down both of those teams. And the second one worked out. it hasn't worked out since then for them. And so you've got a big history of things just not going well. And I think part of the fan base would be, if I was a Marlins fan, be concerned that, let me get invested in this team. They do really well and make a big, deep playoff run. You're going to trade them all away anyway, which leads you back to the issue that you're talking about. The disparity between the haves, and the haves are really 3 or 4 teams. And we might argue that the Cubs are in there and it's somehow 5, but it's not the majority. It's not half. It's not even a quarter of baseball teams that you would consider the upper echelon from an earning standpoint and a money standpoint. Then you've got a whole bunch of mess in the middle, and then a few teams that either by environment, circumstance, or owner indifference just aren't competitive and don't care to be competitive. And it's a problem for the sport, not only long-term, but in the next couple of years. You saw it with, and I know the money thing's not going to work out exactly in this analogy, but you saw it with college football before this past season. People were tired of seeing Alabama play Georgia for a national championship, to the point that people started tuning out for college football. When you had a run with the Patriots every year, even though we all talk about the NFL being really well produced and getting hype built for every event that they have, people got exhausted watching the Patriots win Super Bowls. And
you saw it this year already, turning on the Chiefs.
Yeah,
turned on the Chiefs,
and it's going to happen with the Yankees and Dodgers. Now, they are both very fortunate that the current president of baseball doesn't care, because he really likes teams that make money, especially those based on the East Coast. But it's going to be a problem, because at some point, the ratings that they are trying so hard to pump back up are going to fall when it's just Ohtani versus Judge every year. And I don't even think it's going to work out that way. You're going to have teams that are Boston that might pop up once a year, but that they're going to disappear for 5 years because they don't want to pay the luxury tax. But you also got fans in Pittsburgh who have some really good talent on that team that have nothing to be excited about 4 out of 5 days.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh is an excellent example, as is Cincinnati, because you're also talking about, when you take Major League Baseball as a whole, that's 2 of the richest in tradition franchises. The Pirates had several runs in their history. The Reds, the Big Red Machine, the We Are family from the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's not like these are not communities that do not support a team when it's winning, but because of the modern economics of the game, there is no hope. There is no real shot for them, particularly in the National League. You know, the Yankees are at least kept in reality by cheap ownership for some reason. Like, they're still the biggest spender, but it's not a $400 million difference between them and most of their opponents.
No, and that's their ownership has made a decision that they don't want to spend the money on the tax, and that's fine. But they still spend a lot more than everybody else they play, with the exception of a Red Sox team coming out of nowhere and adding a bunch of payroll once every few years.
Frankly, the Astros have been up there recently.
Yeah. I don't if Alex Bregman, for whatever reason, opts out of that contract with Boston this year, I don't expect Boston to go add $40 million more dollars of payroll to make that up. They'll have said, we took our shot and we'll back off a little bit. And that's what you're seeing teams do. You have this outlier in the National League on the West Coast that doesn't appear to care about that. And the circumstances have all met together. But if you're a Marlins fan, if you're a Reds fan, if you are just about most of the teams, a Brewers fan, what do you hope for long term?
Arizona, Colorado. Exactly. And look, I'm not going to blame the Dodgers ownership for figuring out how to game a system in which they have outspent and not depleted a farm system. That's what a commissioner is supposed to do, to look out for the health of the game long term, and we do not have one that is doing that. Yeah,
and that's the ultimate issue, is that, and I don't know that the system changes when Manfred's gone, because I guess this is his last year, but whoever the owners decide to put back in that seat as commissioner, it's not like they're going to push back against the owners. It'd be amazing to have some of the guys who were in there in the past that had the ability to tell the owners, what you're doing isn't working and we need to do something else.
Right. No, I mean, I get it. We have two more major league stories to go through real quick. Like, we really are doing rapid fire. Do you want to talk a little bit of A&M Texas? To me, it's
I hate the comment that I saw this morning, and just from a competitive standpoint, I think Occupy Left Field on Twitter said that he was giddy about the sweep and would probably give his friends crap about it, but no team fought harder. He listed off LSU and Georgia and somebody else about nobody that y'all have played to this point fought harder in those series. It's a wonderful consolation prize and good for Mike Early and his team for never giving up, but something really interesting is going to have to happen with the A&M baseball program, because I was thinking in the elevator up the way to work this morning, and there is that school of thought, and the Aggies pursued that this offseason with, if you're going to have a rookie coach, even one that you think really highly of, having him learn with the amount of talent that he had about how to be the head coach of a program the size of A&M wasn't necessarily the best move. Now, maybe it was the only move they had, and it was the only move they had to keep the roster together. But I don't know that Early being there, and this is all soft skill stuff, allowed him to make hard enough decisions soon enough about changing lineups, about who was slumping, who was going to come through. And it's just there's no way around this being a disappointing season, barring some miracle run in the NCAA tournament, if the Aggies even make it. I think they probably still will, because I think Missouri's definitely winnable. LSU is winnable, and it'll be kind of come down to what happens in Georgia. Can't afford any more sweeps, but
here's the thing on Mike Early too. He's a 37-year-old man. That is a young age to be the head coach of a program like A&M. And to me, if you're A&M and you hired this guy, you almost had to be like, he's going to be here for a while and we're investing in that growth. Because if he's not, and he's going to go somewhere else and be successful, like he's going to be, and you don't. So I do think A&M's in a really hard choice. I will say, look, I mean, the fact is it was a 3-game sweep. It felt a little bit like the 05 World Series. It was a sweep, but every one of those games, I mean, it was a 1-run differential in all 3 games. And I don't know, Brian, our former host used to say that 1-run games were luck. I've always believed that you make your own luck, especially with the fact that you had gold star after gold star in the outfield. I mean, I was getting ready to throw things at the TV every time that guy in the right field.
Both these teams were absolutely going at it. Both the teams were absolutely going at it as hard as they could. I think the biggest thing, well, 2 things that Schloss has brought to the University of Texas roster and program is, one, he figured out the bullpen, because I can't remember how many times you texted me last season about David Pierce's bullpen not being able to hold leads if they even had leads. This last year was kind of an off year for the Texas program. The other thing Schloss does, and I think he did it at A&M, he certainly did it at TCU, is he gets guys, whether they end up liking him at the end of the day or not, he gets them to perform their best and not beat themselves. So they are very fundamentally sound in almost every aspect of baseball. So you're not going to have a Texas team this year that boots a ball in the 9th inning. Typically, I know that happened Friday night. That's going to open the floodgates. And you saw that with the Texas program under David Pierce a number of times, that the things start going bad, they go really bad really quickly. Schloss has eliminated that. And I think it's why he's one of the best coaches in the game, is because he has the ability to get these guys to not make stupid mistakes and wear out the teams that they play.
What do you think A&M, there's 9 conferences games left. What do you think A&M has to do to make the tournament?
It'd be really good to win 6 of them. Six, I'd be very comfortable. 5 and below that get tough.
Okay. Let's go back to the
Astros. That's LSU, Missouri, and Georgia. So
2 of those are tough. Missouri, though, you should be able to look at that and say we could sweep Missouri.
Well, we need to sweep at this point,
because they're what?
Getting swept this weekend meant we needed to pick up we needed to pick up 1 game in Austin. didn't do that. So there's a little bit behind the curve right now of what I would expect them to need to make the tournament. Having said that, I saw projections that showed Florida still in the tournament as a 3 seed, last team in scenario, and I think A&M's better than that. So we'll see.
Yeah, I would think so too. Two more baseball stories. Another Astro thing, real quick. Chas McCormick grew a mustache, but also he's hitting 300 with a 767 OPS, which I think we were all hoping. I think we both felt like if Chas could go back to 2022/23 Chas or something close to it, it makes all the projections for the outfield see that much better. I do think that the Astros are unfortunately putting a lot of pressure on DeCenzo and Cam Smith to be game changers. How much does it help the Astros if Chas McCormick is able to keep this up?
Well, he has to get playing time for it to matter. He hasn't played a lot this year, and he's done well in his spots he's been given the opportunity, but Espada has had a real problem getting him regular at-bats, getting DeCenzo regular at-bats, trying to keep Cam Smith's head the game. There's a lot going on this particular Astros team, and it's just being highlighted by the fact that what we talked about at the top of the show, Alvarez prior to yesterday, Yiner and Christian Walker just haven't met expectations offensively.
So let's be honest, too. Neither is Paredes because he's not hitting home runs. That was a big part of it, too. Yes, he's getting on base, and yes, he's seeing a lot of pitches. I love that, but he's not hitting bombs.
Yeah, but I think that comes. It's why I'm not necessarily worried about anything because to me, it's always about the approach and not necessarily about the results. Because I think if your process is right, your approach is right, you'll get the results. They may not just come at the beginning of the season. That just may be who these Astros are this year. I still find it really hard to believe we're in a world where Yordan Alvarez has lost his power. I really find it hard to believe that Christian Walker doesn't know how to hit anymore because that's not been the case. And it's not a Jose Abreu situation where there were some clear physical breakdown pieces prior to Christian Walker signing with the Astros. And you were hoping to get one more good year out of Abreu and pay for 2 after that. Christian Walker should be in the prime of his career. And I'm sure that he's pressing. I'm sure that he is not. I know he's not happy because I've read the interviews he's given. But I think you stick to the process. You don't make a lot of stupid changes at bat. We've seen players do that when they start pressing. That part's going to come. Yiner's a little bit more of a concern for me because I think there's a bunch going on there. But I also think the idea of being the everyday catcher is physically taxing, and I don't know that he's dealt with it really, really well.
I do think most of Yonner's is mental as well, right? Like I think there's a lot of pressure because like you said earlier, it's breaking down both parts of his game.
Yep.
And that's weird.
But I think you've got to get to a world where you make a decision that McCormick's going to be your 4th outfielder or DeCenzo is going to be your 4th outfielder, and whoever it's not doesn't really have a place on the roster. For DeCenzo, that means going back to AAA and getting regular at-bats. For McCormick, and I know we're going to get pushback on this because he was on the 22 team, so of course he's the best player ever for some of our fan base, but he's a guy that if you can keep him hitting 300 and look like he has a little bit of pop somewhere, could be an interesting piece to deal. We were texting about it a little bit yesterday, but the Astros are going to have a 40-man roster issue really, really soon. And the fact that we're carrying 2 guys that don't get a lot of playing time simultaneously means that there's going to be moves beyond just figuring out which 5 or 6 starting pitchers are going to be in the rotation and how that affects the bullpen. Because there's got to be balance on that roster. And DeCenzo has a long-term home. I don't know that McCormick does.
Yeah. I mean, DeCenzo, exciting young player, also making a lot of his opportunities. I wanted to talk this last story real quick because I think in some ways you're really more articulate than I am when it comes to macro social issues. I want to talk a little bit about Jarret Duran, who is the Boston Red Sox player.
I have a journalism degree, sir. I don't know anything about any issues. I regurgitate. I was trained to read off a teleprompter.
I was just going to scream and yell on the microphone like I did at the Revenge of the Sith thing, but this one I thought need a little bit more articulate opinion. But Red Sox outfielder Jarret Duran heckled by a Cleveland Guardians fan saying that he should have finished the job when he was attempted suicide. I think that guy needs to be, as far as you can do it, however you're able to do it, needs to be banned from every Major League Baseball stadium to begin with. but it's like Twitter's come to real life, man. And I don't know. I feel like through sports, which is supposed to be the haven away from the nastiness of everything, we're between the heckling of Sanders for getting dropped in the draft to this. It just seems like Twitter's become real life, and it's really, really gross.
Yeah. As far as the Cleveland fan, I don't know what Major League Baseball does, but you're starting to see a little bit more of aggressive fan behavior towards players, and that becomes an issue. It's an issue that we police when they're aggressive towards other fans.
Yeah.
If you're loud, boisterous, have too much to drink, get overserved, whatever you want to call it, and start shit, you get removed from a stadium. It doesn't take a lot to get that to happen to somebody. Play that card wisely, friends. But as far as abuse heaped towards players, that becomes an issue that they don't deal with. It's just it becomes this weird thing that, well, they make enough money, I can do what I want to them because, dance monkey. It's gross, and if it was just targeted towards athletes or performers or something like that, you could almost go, all right, well, that's the cost of the thing. But these same assholes are assholes to everybody. And we have become a society, at least recently, maybe more than recently, and I've just been blind to it, that has no ability to politely disagree anymore. Yeah. Everything's to the extreme. I know I texted you how much I don't like our schools playing each other regularly anymore. And it's not because I'm afraid of the competition. It's not because I don't like losing. I don't, but it's because the fan bases at some level are so toxic that it's not just about you won the series or, hey, you really fucked up that football game. It's questioning your ability or right to exist as the person that you are. And I know that sounds dumb from a sporting standpoint, but it's not just sports. It's what we do with people with religion. We do it with politics. We do it with everything. You're either on my side or not. And it's this teamization or tribalism, I guess, for what it really is, that it just permeated everything. And we've lost the ability to be decent human beings. And it really becomes really, really disturbing. And I say we as a giant generalization. There are good people. There are people who try to be decent people, but there's so many more people that have just given up that ghost and just like, there's no incentive to be a decent person anymore.
I think the grossest part of all of it is you can even see those people be decent people as an individual, but you put them in a group or you put them on social media where there are no repercussions, and then their worst natures come out. And I completely agree. I avoided all kinds of social media during this weekend because I want the rivalry to be fun, mostly because it's you and I, and we're really close. But the idea that, especially in a baseball series where you're over celebrating one win, knowing you're playing tomorrow, and what if that game goes the different direction? And by the way, you won all 3 games, but by 1 run. So that meant you're an eyelash away from being on the other end. None of it seems fun. It's just not fun anymore in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I have no doubt that those two teams respect one another. The fan bases are a completely different situation. It's not just baseball. And it certainly is highlighted when it's a particular opponent versus another opponent. We don't have this kind of heat with Vanderbilt. And frankly, I wouldn't know if Vanderbilt did talk smack against us because it's Vanderbilt. Who cares? It's like when Baylor would win 2 football games in the same season a couple of years in a row and got all puffed up about their football history. It's inconsequential, but I should be able to make that comment in front of a Baylor fan, and a Baylor fan not decide that I also rape women and eat the blood of babies and things like that. And that's kind of that's the level of vitriol. Yeah. It's no longer joking around. It's no longer this ability to take a ribbing, not take yourself so seriously. Everything's so damn serious. And it is, because the world's kind of in a state of turmoil right now. But if we can't be just decent people to one another, I don't know what the point of fixing the turmoil would even be. Yeah.
I have nowhere else to go but to leave it with that. I think that's perfectly said. We will close out the show with our highlights from the Longhorns, Aggies, and Astros.
So 2 on with 1 out, and that was the theory for Joe switching Paredes and Jordan in the batting order today, is that he wanted more traffic for the big man, and we'll see how it plays out after the double off the wall his first time up. That ball's hammered deep to center field. All the way back is Isbell looking up. That's a 3-run shot to straightaway center. Jordan Alvarez puts 3 on the board. The Astros snap their 26-inning scoreless streak, and it's 3-0 Houston.
1-2 to Kent. And it's pulled to first base, handled by Schuster to second for 1, back to first, and Texas closes it out with a double play.
I wanted to add, I saw The Accountant 2 this weekend.
Oh,
John Barenthal is worth the price of admission because he's fantastic.
I've heard nothing but good things about the film. And I had sort of never seen the first one. I watched it a week ago and thoroughly enjoyed it. Even found myself a little misty at the end with the reveal of who his like man in the chair was, you know, because as a teacher, I've taught kids that are on a spectrum that were fully immersed. And so I do think we particularly, it goes back to what you, as we've gotten more and more mean, we've lost our ability to be compassionate and understand that just because you're on the spectrum doesn't mean you're ineffective. You're not, like Robert RFK Jr. said, basically doomed to not being able to wipe your ass for the rest of your life. Like, yeah. And so I found that watching that movie in that context after those comments, it actually was a pretty powerful cinematic experience for me, which I was not expecting out of a Ben Affleck shoot 'em up movie.
Well, and I will tell you in the second one, I think one of the criticisms I saw is they leaned a little bit away from Ben Affleck's personal issues, Chris Wolf's personal issues, the character's personal issues. So they downplayed it a little bit. He's still the same character, still has quirks, but they're a little bit. It's almost like he grew and developed over time, and people are upset about it. But they do lean into the idea that kids who have learning disabilities, kids who have learning differences, are neurodivergent, are a giant part of the story. And I'm not giving anything away to say that we have now men in the chair and not just a man in the chair.
I love that. I cannot wait to see it. All right. Andy, ending on a bright spot. I love that. For Andy, I'm Jim. This has been Off Day with Ballpark Nation. We will see you guys next week. All right, man. If you want to send me a clip, how did it